Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Andronicus. I'm the Director of Diversity for the Center for Science of Information. We have a couple of things, housekeeping items to get to before we move right into the talk. If you'll notice, wait, that way, there's a poll down there. If you could participate in that and just identify yourself as staff, student, etc., that would be helpful. Thanks. And also notice down there is a chat window. If you want to ask Maurina a question about her presentation, please feel free to do so. And I'll introduce Maurina Aranda. Maurina is currently a PhD student in biology. She has been affiliated with the Center for Science of Information for at least a couple of years now. And about this time last year, our center was approached by another science and technology center called CMOP, which is the Center for Coastal Margin and Prediction.
Observation.
And they have, I'm sorry?
Observation and prediction.
Oh, observation and prediction. Sorry, I even wrote it down and still got it wrong. That's why we call it CMOP. They have a tribal initiative that they run through their STC, and they asked all the other 13 STCs to help recruit graduate students who would go to Alaska and visit with the Haida community and share their research with them. So Maurina Aranda is our graduate student from the Center for Science and Information, who we sent to Alaska. And Maurina, I've been looking forward to this talk for a really long time, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelly, for that introduction. So, as Kelly said, my name is Maurina Aranda, and today I will be talking about the opportunities through science and technology centers for Native American collaborations. It's a very broad title. I deliberately made it that way because I have a lot to talk about in this presentation. So just to give you an outline of how I'm going to be structuring this, first I'm going to talk about the collaboration between, as Kelly said, the Center for Science and Information and CMAP, so these two NSF Science and Technology Centers, that allowed me to participate in this Alaskan opportunity. Following that, I am going to discuss some research that was performed at the American Indian Science and Engineering Society's annual meeting that I also had the opportunity to participate in, and I think is really interesting, particularly for me as someone who is interested in cross-cultural science education. So first, I'm going to talk about this collaboration between these two science and technology centers. So as many of you know, the Center for Science of Information has this very broad mission where we talk about integrative research. This is typically what these presentations are about. Today, I am not going to be talking about the information theory at all. I'll be focusing on the other pillar, which is education, human resources, and diversity. The others include knowledge transfer, leadership and management, and ethics. But for the focus of my presentation today, I will be discussing education, human resources, and diversity. So, as Kelly just said, there was this collaborative effort between CMAP, the Center for Coastal Margin Observation and Prediction, and the Center for Science and Information. And as many science and technology centers, they have the shared goal of education, human resources, and diversity. So they wanted to recruit other graduate students from other science technology centers, and I was very fortunate to be a part of this. So CMAP, the Center for Coastal Margin Observation and Prediction, which is a lot to say, so from here on out, I'll just be referring to them as CMAP. So in their goal of increasing education, human resources, and diversity through their Science Technology Center, they have what's known as this Native American initiative. So just as a very brief background, Native Americans are the most underrepresented in the science fields. Less than 1%, I think the last statistic I saw was less than 1% are seen in the STEM sciences. And not that many end up going to college, and very few go off to pursue graduate careers. So CMAP has been working with Native American communities in Alaska in order to increase the awareness and opportunities awarded to these students. So they invited me to go with them to Alaska. So shown here is just the very long journey that I traveled from West Lafayette to flying into Ketchikan, Alaska, which is a small town in the southeast portion of the state. from there, I met up with fellow graduate students from CMAP, and we took a 3-hour ferry ride and then an 1.5-hour car ride to this very small and remote Alaskan village known as Hideth, Alaska. So what they wanted me to participate in was what's known as this Hideth Culture Camp. So what this is every year, the Haida tribe in Heidelberg, they have this culture camp, which allows them to have people from other communities come in, and they teach them the Haida language, their traditional songs, their dancing, carving or woodworking, their weaving, beading, other forms of artistry, and then also about traditional food gathering and preparation, such as say fishing and collecting berries, for example. At the very end of this week, they have this large ceremony and festival where they raise a totem pole, which is a very ceremonious event in the Haida community, and then followed by this large festival where they incorporate other Native American communities to come in and celebrate. So just to show you guys some of the opportunities that I had while I was participating in this culture camp, the first being I was able to make my own drum and mallet, which is from trees and then having deer hide and having to physically weave that around the structure of the drum and then make the mallet themselves. Also, as far as artistry goes, they have these paddles that you shape, and you perform the woodworking in order to shape and carve these paddles into a nice shape, and then you follow that with the painting and drawing of these paddles in decorative patterns. So shown here are just two representative pictures of that. And what was more interesting to me was the education on sustainability in fishing. So shown here, I have several pictures of myself as I was able to go Dungeness crab fishing in the Pacific Ocean. So I've never been crab fishing before. I'm from Michigan, so I do know a little bit about fishing, but definitely not crab fishing. So this was a really fun experience for me. And crab fishing is a major part. Crab and salmon are major parts of the diet of the people in Heidelberg. So this is a big part of their community, and it was a lot of fun for me to be able to go out on these boats and learn how to set the crab pots, pull them up, sort the crab out, and then learn how to cook and preserve the crab meat. I also was able to tour several fishing vessels. So shown here is one that is a commercial salmon fishing vessel. So I was able to tour the boat and see the salmon fishing, how salmon fishing goes about and how they do so on these commercial fishing vessels. So at the end of the week, after I spent the week learning the language, learning the dances, how to do the artistry, the woodwork, the fishing, collecting berries, eating a lot of plants and vegetations, out hiking, which is something that I would never have done normally, there was this large ceremony and festival. So over the course of the year, carvers from this community have come together and carved out these totem poles, shown here, which is an eagle. They had an eagle and a raven. So they spent months carving these totem poles out of trees, and then not just carving, but then also decorating and painting them. And then at the end of this culture camp week, the members of the community will physically carry these totem poles, which weigh hundreds and hundreds of pounds. So the men who do so are very strong. They carried them about a quarter mile up a hill. It was raining and it was freezing cold during this time, just to give an appreciation of what these men had to do. They carry these totem poles into a totem pole park that they have. And then they physically lift them up, shown here using ropes and just sheer manpower. The entire community participates in this. During so, there will be traditional songs sung, and every member of the community comes and watches this event happen. And not just of the Haida community, but neighboring Native American communities also come and participate in this event, as it is so ceremonial. So I was able to see two totem poles raised, the eagle, which is shown here, and the raven. Shown here is a picture of, we have from left to right, Eli and Vanessa. So Vanessa is the director of diversity for CMAP, and she brought her son with her. Wendy, who is a graduate student from CMAP, who just graduated, so she's a postdocing in Michigan State. One of the community members, Minnie, and then myself, while we were observing this tradition. So following the totem pole raising is the actual Hideth Festival and celebration. So first you start off with this massive dinner. Everyone from the community pitches in and they make a lot of the traditional dishes that you would see. So lots of salmon, lots of crab, lots of halibut, lots of interesting plants and rice dishes that are typical of the Haida community. And then following this dinner, you have a dancing celebration. So, which is shown here in the picture on the, I guess, right of the screen. So not just Haida members, but members of the neighboring tribes, so the Tsimshian and Tlingit, will come and they'll participate in their native dances. And this, you know, is a several hour long event, and it's really interesting to see those differences in those cultures and some of the similarities between them. And it's just a really fun thing to observe. So shown here in the picture on your left is myself, Lauren Smythe, who was Wendy's daughter, Wendy, and then Vanessa and Eli again. And you see them in some traditional Haida attire. So in addition to participating in this culture camp, we also went there to do some science, which always makes me happy. So we participated in the science education with this Native Alaskan community. So what we did several things. So during the week of this culture camp, Wendy and I and her daughter Lauren, we participated in this oceanography class. Now I'm a cellular biologist, I don't know a whole lot about oceanography, so I was just kind of there to help. But what we did is we created this little miniature submarine and allowed the students to launch it off a dock and then see the fish and the wildlife under the water in the Pacific Ocean, which was a lot of fun. The kids are very receptive to this. In addition to that, we initiated these science projects for middle school and high school students, which is shown here with Wendy and several of these students. So we initiated several science projects that related to the ecosystems of this community. So for example, looking at shipworms off the coast of the ocean and using that to assess how well the water is. And I'll go into this later, but we started these science projects as a way for these students to have a nice poster presentation to attend this conference, which I'll discuss in the later half of my talk. In addition to that, Wendy, who was finishing up her doctoral thesis, well, she already defended, but she just had to collect just a little bit more data for her doctoral thesis. We were able to help her with other members of the Haida community perform some biogeochemical studies in Soda Bay, which is this beautiful bay that is about a half an hour away from Heidelberg. So seen here is myself, her daughter, and Minnie, a member of the community, as we're doing soil and water sample collections. And then seen on your right would be some of the children, some of the students and other members of the community participating in this as well. So for someone who normally stays in a lab and looks at cells under a microscope, this was very interesting to me to actually physically get my hands wet in a field, having to hike to different locations to collect these samples. It was a really fun opportunity to kind of do something different with my science. Okay, so that sums up everything that I did while I was in Heidelberg, Alaska. And then this leads me to the research that we did at the American Indian Science and Engineering Society's annual meeting. So this occurred just this past November in Phoenix, Arizona. And this is where we discussed building capacity to use science for sovereignty in Native coastal communities. So shown here are all the team leaders of this presentation. So it was a presentation, but it turned into a research talk, as I'll describe here. So we had two objectives with this study. The first was to address and understand the challenges that are surrounding river and coastal ecosystems that are important to these Native American communities. So what I mean by that is that with the changing climate and increased human activity, these ecological resources are being depleted. And this is critical for members of this community who rely heavily on these ecological resources. So that leads us into our second objective, which is to then take an active role in bridging the gap of knowledge between non-Native scientists, such as myself, and Native American Alaskan Native communities. So the objectives of the study, there were three. There were three specific goals. The first was to identify how these Native American and Alaskan Native communities are defining both the STEM fields, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and traditional ecological knowledge, which is a term I will define later on. Second, we wanted to identify the challenges that are faced when you couple the STEM fields and traditional ecological knowledge, and when taking into consideration what this means for their culture. And finally, we wanted to discuss and address some of these these challenges and work to overcome them, to integrate the STEM disciplines into these tribal communities. So traditional ecological knowledge is a term that most people, I know for myself, I had no idea exactly what that definition is. So as you know, STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, that's your science that you think of in a traditional sense. So the experimentation, observation, building technologies. Traditional ecological knowledge is science that is knowledge that has been passed down from generation through generation. So this is the knowledge that these Native American communities use in order to work on the sustainability of their resources. So what we did at this conference is we had what's called a World Cafe style presentation. And what this means is we had 4 tables, and we were able to have 4 different conversations with participants from this conference, which we keep calling ACES, which stands for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. So these 4 tables, which were led by graduate team members, participants, approximately 10 to 12 at each table. And these ACES members range from middle and high school students up into scholars who have been working in the sciences or been teaching for years. So there's a very wide range of demographics here. So approximately 10 to 12 people would sit at these tables. We'd have a really honest and open discussion, and then after a certain amount of time, they would switch to the next table. So they were able to have 4 separate discussions, and then we collected those, we wrote down those responses, collected them, and I'll talk more about those later. So the questions that we were asking these participants were, first, how do you define the STEM sciences? This is the conversation that I was in charge of leading. Second, we would say, okay, well, now how do you define traditional ecological knowledge? Then we would ask them, what challenges do you encounter when you are integrating these 2 fields? And finally, how do you address and overcome these challenges? So we recorded these results, and these results are going to be compiled, analyzed, and then compared and contrasted to those from another scientific meeting, which was the Geoscience Alliance National Meeting. The demographics of this meeting are slightly different than those seen at ACES. In a sense, the Geoscience Alliance has traditionally more people in the STEM fields and more traditional scientists compared to those who only use traditional ecological knowledge. So we're in the process of compiling all these responses, but initial observations that I can comment on, just based off of the conversation that I was leading, and just some of the conversations that I heard from members, is that there are many similarities between the STEM fields and traditional ecological knowledge. However, there's also a strong opposition to say that these 2 are one and the same. And there's a lot of hesitations within the Native American and Alaska Native communities to integrate these 2 fields together. And looking back on the history of Native Americans, you can see why there'd be some hesitation. A lot of times they associate the STEM sciences with the people in power who took away a lot of the power from these communities. So we're in the process of reading through all these dialogues and these conversations and comparing and contrasting the 2 with the other meeting. But the conclusion that we hope to gain is that by raising awareness of the similarities and differences between the STEM and traditional ecological knowledge fields, we can bridge the gap between them. And then if we allow these 2 to merge, we can cultivate a better understanding of how to manage the ecological systems in Native coastal communities, which is very important in a sense of increasing sustainability of their ecological resources. So with that, concludes the end of my talk of everything I have participated in this past year between going to Alaska and then participating in the that annual meeting. So I have a lot of people to acknowledge. First are the Center for Science and Information and the Center for Coastal Margin Observation and Prediction, which I'm sorry I actually left on the observation in there, as Kelly did. But these two organizations, I really can't thank them enough for allowing me to have this opportunity to work with Native American populations. For myself, I'm very interested in cross-cultural STEM science cross-cultural STEM education. So as a Latina, as someone who has not had that much experience with Native American populations, this was really eye-opening for me. And it's something that I hope to integrate further into my research. Dr. Wendy Smythe and Vanessa Green from CMOP, they were instrumental in helping me while I was in Alaska. We all lived together, we had a great time, and they are now two colleagues that I know will help me further on in my career, and I love discussing this work with them. And then all of our ACES collaborators, so Sonia Ibarra, who is a graduate student, Melanie Kadaki Minnie, who is a member of the Haida community, Aaron and Carolina, who are two undergrads, and then Lauren Smythe, who is a high school student who will be going to college this year. And then all the members of the community. Shown here in this picture are several students that came with us to ACES and presented their science fair projects. So it was a lot of fun and a great opportunity. So with that, I will take any questions or comments. Okay, Maurina, so we have a question from Callie, and it says, Maurina, can you clarify the difference between Native American and Alaskan Natives? So Alaska Natives are Native Americans. It's just like another distinction. So Native Americans, as you know, there are Native American populations all throughout the United States. You have, throughout California, the Southwest, even here in Indiana, up in Michigan, East Coast. At ACES, it was actually really interesting to see the different communities all from every single state and also Canada that were represented there. So Alaska Native is just Native Americans that reside in Alaska. You're very welcome, Kelly. Maybe it looks like someone maybe.
Everyone, feel free to type your questions there in the chat box. We have one coming in right now. We'll be patient for that.
Okay. They said, hi Maurina, I enjoyed your talk very much. You mentioned that in this study it would help make better decisions for the local environment and ecology there. Who manages those decisions currently? In Heidelberg, there is a Heidelberg Cooperative Association, which is in charge of taking, say soil samples, doing field research, checking to see how those resources are maintained. So in Heidelberg, there is a small cooperation, which is just made up of members of the community who have some experience in the sciences, geology, environmental science, who are in charge of monitoring these resources. Melanie Kadaki, or Minnie, is a member of that Heidelberg Cooperative Association, which is why she was in charge of taking us out hiking and making sure that we survived our trek throughout the woods to collect these soil and water samples. You're very welcome. Oh, Kelly asked me a question? Sorry.
I could have just said it.
Kelly's question is, will you stay connected to this community in your future research? I would love to. I would love to have the opportunity to go back Alaska's beautiful. I tell everyone they need to go there because it was a beautiful, beautiful state. I still am in contact with some members of the community, and I'm taking several education courses this semester, one of which is cross-cultural science education. So I'm actually thinking of putting in a Native American spin on a project that I have to do for that class. So I'm thinking of contacting some of those students just to hear their thoughts and have an open dialogue with them on some things that I'm thinking about on how to increase diversity in science education.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kelly.
While you're thinking of other questions, if there are any other questions, let me just bring your attention to the poll in case you haven't filled that out yet. It just helps us note who's tuning in. And again, this talk is recorded and will be available on our website in the future. So, Maurina, thank you so much. That was very interesting. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Kelly.
And thank you all for tuning in.
All right.